Thanks, Michael, and thank you all for being here. So, a couple of times a year, I try to get together with you, and the end of the calendar year seems like a good time to do that and catch up on a few things. First thing, happy holidays to everybody in here. Hope you have a great holiday season. I know a lot of you will be in Charlotte for part of that, so we'll celebrate together. Want to mention just a handful of things. First one is the two troopers, Abe and Caden, that were shot in the incident in Martinsburg. My thoughts and prayers go out to them and their families during this time. So, during the holidays, usually a time you're celebrating and getting together, and just two brave young men going in, doing their job, and praying for a full recovery for both of them. So, very excited about our news yesterday with our volleyball coach. Coach Greeny is a very accomplished coach, and I made the comment to our committee, you always go into every search with multiple plans, A, B, C, and D. Very rarely does plan A work. It's usually a stretch plan, but this one it actually did. So really excited about her. You'll get a chance to Zoom with her later today. Very, very proud of our men's soccer program. Coach Stratford's a great representative of the institution, one of our own. Just does his job, doesn't complain, doesn't ask for anything. And just has a great culture in that program. So we're very, very proud of them. Excited to be going to Charlotte. That happened at the waning hours, last minute. And so, I know that's one that our fan base is excited about. Every time that I look or see anything on ticket reports, it looks like we're going to have a great crowd there. So can't wait to have Mountaineer Nation show up there. And then want to just mention briefly women's basketball. They're playing today at 2 p.m., but have started the season off on a really, really good run. 10-0, and got a chance to be 11-0 today. So if you didn't have a chance to see the education game the other day, there was a young lady from the other team that had 37 and was as hot as I've ever seen a player in an opposing gym. So we were able to win the game, and you got a chance to see kind of a once-in-a-lifetime performance from her, so that was exciting. So with that, I will open it up. We can talk about whatever is on your mind. I know President Charlie Baker put a proposal out there. We may talk about some. We had a court case that caught a little bit of attention here in the state of West Virginia and affects the transfer rules. So whatever you all want to talk about, we can talk about.
Great. So start with the court case. Might as well begin for there. So your thoughts, do you think the NCAA comes back after the spring and comes up with another proposal on multi-time transfers? What's your assumption on what's going to happen there?
Yeah. Well, first, Greg, towards the end of the football season, there was a press conference, and I think you felt ill and you weren't here. And there was sheer confusion about what we were going to do when it come Q&A time for Coach Brown. Was there not, Michael? Mm-hmm. Nobody knew what to do. I didn't think there was going to be any questions. So first of all, I would say I'm generally supportive of some type of regulator on transfers. At one time, there was a year of residency for all transfers. Then we introduced the grad transfer, which made a ton of sense to me. Then we gave the one-time transfer. So that all made sense to me. The restriction on more than one-time transfers is not there to keep the student-athlete from having options. It's there because of the desire to graduate student-athletes. And so if over 4 years of eligibility, you're transferring multiple times, it makes it really difficult to get a degree and to get a quality education. I think probably the biggest misstep is when you have a subjective waiver process. And so once we granted the one-time transfer, in my opinion, we either should have had no waivers or an objective criteria where you either meet it or you don't, but it's not a subjective process. And so we'll see what happens in court. The NCAA may lose the ability to put on any regulators, and we'll just see how that happens. But my hope would be that there would not be a subjective process involved, because what that does, it forces the student athlete to make a decision without knowing if they're going to be eligible or not. And to me, that's just a risk that shouldn't have to be there. We should be able to determine now, are we going to grant a waiver? And is that waiver, what would trigger it? And there shouldn't be any subjectivity to it.
No waivers for multi-time guys other than maybe a real strict criteria?
I think that would be one solution, and it would be a solution that I would generally be supportive of if it met the legal challenges. Because at least then everybody knows. A student athlete's educated, they know up front, I get a one-time transfer and then a grad transfer. So that's really 2 times that you can transfer. I think what makes it really difficult is, hey, here's these waivers. And, historically, they've been pretty reasonably easy to get. And everybody knew they were going to be harder to get. The NCAA was clear about that. And the reason why they made them harder to get is the membership asked for it. But nonetheless, you have this history of them being pretty easy to get. So it put a lot of student athletes in a really difficult position. And so that would be my solution. Either there aren't waivers, or if there are waivers, it's an objective. Here are the things that you will get a waiver for, and it's automatically triggered.
Yeah, Ren, you have a basketball coach, interim coach in there, and he's kind of going to war against AR-47s or whatever those things are with 3 bullets. How do you evaluate? How do you judge a guy in that situation where, he really doesn't have much anything going through no fault of his own?
Yeah, I think what I would probably say to that is the general public, and you all for that matter, it's like an iceberg, and you see the tip of it. You see what happens out there on game day. I get a chance to see the entire iceberg. Like, I'm there every day. I know the behind the scenes of the battles that have been faced. Some that you're aware of, and some that you're not even aware of, right? And so I think, just like I've said with football before, I get the focus from the public on wins and losses because it's the only metric they really have a window into. But I get a 360 view of everything that goes on in the program. And so, my goal is to do a pretty thorough review of each of our programs at the end of the year. In terms of men's basketball, they've only played a third of their games, so they still have 2/3 of the season left. It has certainly been a season that's met full of challenges. I've been clear that I think that Coach Eilert's handled most, if not all, of those challenges well, and he'll have my full support throughout this season. And at the conclusion of the season, we'll decide where we go from there.
He's only through a third of a season, but you're through your first year here now. What has that been like? I know in your wildest dreams you couldn't have dreamed that your first year was going to be like this.
It's been certainly a crazy first year. I've lost a little weight, but part of the deal is if every time you go to eat, you get your phone rings with some kind of crazy thing happening, you don't eat as much. So I think for me, I always tend to look at the positive aspect of things. And so the challenges that we've been through have really given me a chance to build deeper and more meaningful relationships. And that goes from our student athletes to our coaches, to our administration, to our board, to our donors and fans. And so in that regard, I'm actually grateful because, we've probably dealt with 5 or 6 years of challenges in a year. My family, I've said this before, they have loved being here. People have treated them incredibly well. We've been welcomed here and made to feel at home. Culturally, this is very similar to where we grew up in rural Oklahoma. And so, it's been a challenging year, but it's also been a year where I've felt like I've really gotten to know the people here.
Have you been able to put the organization together that you wanted to, or have all these distractions kept you from being at the place at the end of one year that you wanted to be?
Yeah, We probably haven't got as far on some of the planning and strategic initiatives and strategic vision planning that we would like to, but we've made a lot of progress, and that's happening behind the scenes. We have a steering committee that is going to meet after the first of the year and start to really drill down. We do have a staff realignment, reorganization that we've internally, we know it already. We just are waiting until after the first of the year to announce it. So we've gotten most of the things that you would have wanted to get done in the first year done or in process. And so I think we've given all of the challenges, really good progress on all of those things.
Yeah, Wren, looking at Jen Greeny, can you put into perspective how rare it is to even have the chance to hire someone with her resume?
Yeah, in 20 years, it's by far the best resume that I've ever been able to hire, and probably the only one that would be close is when I was at Northwest Missouri State Division II. I hired Coach Kellogg, and he came from Fort Lewis College, I believe it was Fort Lewis, and he had taken them to the Final Four, maybe even was national runner-up. And so from a D2 to D2, that was a huge coup at the time. But I know there's been a lot of high level programs who've tried to get her interested in their job over time. She was at her alma mater. She played there, from there. I think Washington State and Oregon State have been dealt a really tough hand in realignment. Probably got her to be more considering of other opportunities. And we had two processes going. We had a process of trying to recruit her and a process of vetting other candidates. So like we met other candidates and had some people we felt really good about. But it was always kind of, if we can get her, this is a no-brainer. We got to get this across the finish line. And so we actually were able to get that done. And I think it says a lot for WVU, a lot for the new Big 12 and how we're positioned in the new conference, and just a lot for really the sport of volleyball. Like I don't know if you all saw this or not. The Final Four in volleyball did over 1 million, and the championship game did 1.7 million. So to put that in perspective, football programs, really good programs, won't average 1.7 million viewers for their linear games for the course of the year. So those are monster numbers, and that sport is growing unbelievably. So it's a sport where we wanted to invest, and we wanted to send a message, and I think it did.
When you're in the search committee, how do you even think that she was available?
Well, I always use a search firm for one, and then what we do is I will take the search committee and I'll say, hey, you're assigned these conferences, and we are going to look at, in mid-major conferences, successful head coaches who we may have interest in. And then in power conferences, we're going to look at high major assistants who've had a lot of success, or if there's some reason that a high major, a Power 5 head coach would be gettable. They have a tie here, they're an alum here, whatever the case may be, let's put them on the list. And so we are developing our own list, and then we're doing that independent of the search firm, because I want to cross-reference those to see where their list and our list are the same. And they have a lot more connections, right? And they get a lot truer opinions. Somebody doesn't mind to tell me a story to help, as a reference for somebody they really like. But you don't want to do that to a search firm, because that comes back around later on and can hurt you. So they're able to get really good opinions. So we had Coach Greeny on our list because we knew, hey, this may be a time that it makes sense to reach out to her. And then when the search firm was doing their due diligence, they thought it was worth a phone call there as well. So the initial call I made was to her and talked to her AD and let him know I was going to make that outreach. I still, a lot of people don't do that, but I'm old school in that way. I think it's the right way to do things. And it went from there.
Mike?
I don't know, a couple weeks ago, you guys put out the RFP for upgrades and improvements, and I think the big item was probably luxury seating, suites, whatever you want to call it in football. How would that look, do you think? And then just in that RFP, what else do you envision across the athletic campus?
Yeah, the RFP is really for the broad facilities master plan to look at our entire footprint, and they'll come in and they'll interview our coaches. They'll take a subset of our student athletes. They'll talk to our administrative staff. They'll talk to some fans. They'll talk to colleagues on campus. And the way I always view it is I'd rather it be more than less in terms of let's put out the big vision that's out there that who we want to be when we grow up. And let's pretend for a second that money's not an object. But everything that we'd need, let's get it out on the table. And then from there, we would develop the facility master plan and start to plug things in, but not in a whole lot of detail because you don't want to spend the cost to go into great design work and get actual drawings and cost estimates because all that costs money, and then a year or two from now it's not worth anything because the price of things have changed. So most of those projects will be just a basic rendering, and really the most important thing is figuring out the adjacencies and where you want to put things. But the one thing we do want to run out a little further is Pushkar Stadium. I've been clear that we can raise revenues here. Most of our revenue streams are up, but premium seating at Pushkar Stadium is a hindrance to be able to grow our budget to where it needs to be. And so that's something that is very prominent on my radar. I don't have a plan today for funding and building that, and part of that is I don't know exactly what we want to build and what the cost of that would be. But the facility master planning process and that RFP that's out there, and I believe they've had probably a dozen or so firms that submitted a proposal, and those are being reviewed even now. But that'll help with that process.
After some initial back and forth with Huggins, it's been very quiet for a while. I'm imagining it's not been silent. There's probably been communication, but where do things stand as far as a resolution or contractual obligations, or just maybe that's completely tied off now too?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to speak with Coach since shortly after he stepped down. But as far as I know, it's there's been nothing new. So I think it's fairly resolved. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I have a lot of respect and appreciation for what Coach did here, and and there probably will be a time and place where he and I will have a chance to catch up. I think he's been busy with things. I've been busy with things. I just hadn't had a chance to visit with him.
Was there any type of transaction as far as like owing him what he was paid beyond what he'd already made, or is it just that when he was, however he did leave, that was it? There was no money,
Correct.
No more salary.
Yeah, there's been no additional payments.
Last week, Chip Kelly talked about kind of treating football as a separate entity in college sports. Would you be someone who's in favor of kind of having a general football conference and then everyone else, or do you think all sports should be more tied in together?
Well, listen, if we were putting this together today, there's no way we would do it the way that it's done. Like, this is insane. So, in theory, would I be okay with having a football-affiliated conference and then everything else in other conferences? Yes. And in fact, I would argue pull football out, let's affiliate by conference there, and have a system that's not that much different than most states do with their high schools, district, regional, area, state. To me, that makes a ton of sense. But conferences are so entrenched in the power structure, and commissioners are very powerful. And so, it's like, you watch Game of Thrones? are you too young to have watched Game of Thrones? Have we went that fast? Like it's pretty rare for kings to give up part of their kingdom without some kind of fight. And so, like, could that happen? It'd take a lot of people to come into a room and put their personal, territories aside and say, let's do what makes sense here. And, I'll say this, football is the primary driver in media deals, but it's not the only driver. And so there would be a give on the value of basketball packages in some leagues if you to do basketball with other leagues that may not draw as many eyeballs. And so, when you look at TV, really it comes down to, and streaming's becoming more popular, but linear networks still fund the vast majority of the deal. And so it's how many linear networks are there, and then how many windows does each of those linear networks have in a course of a day? And so you just add up that inventory, and that's what's being split up. So you look at our men's basketball TV schedule this year. When it come out, there were some fans that were upset because they felt like we didn't get the respect that we had gotten previously because we had more games on ESPN Plus. It has nothing to do with respect. We had 10 teams, and we went to 14. Next year it'll be 16. We have the same number of windows, right? And so every time you add, then there's going to be less linear opportunities per school on average. And so when you start to look at all of that and you start trying to divide that up, getting everybody to say, oh, we're going to push our chips to the middle and do some other deal, it's just harder than it seems. So in theory, do I think it would be a good idea? And if we were starting from scratch, it'd be a great idea. Like the practicality of getting everybody to do that, I think is tough. And I think in the backdrop of that, the bigger issue we have is the whole revenue share question, which Coach Kelly's model really doesn't necessarily speak to that. I think it's going to happen in some capacity. The thing that I think escapes a lot of the general public is the revenue that comes into college athletics. The vast majority of it is football. Then men's basketball brings in some, and then other sports bring in some too. But you have to understand there's a difference between having revenue and being profitable, right? And so every sport has revenue of some kind. There's not very many that are profitable. And so when you look at the sports that are actually profitable, it really comes down to, a couple. And so schools are bound, if you distribute funding, to distribute that in accordance with Title IX. So you have to distribute for whatever you distribute to male athletes, you have to distribute to female athletes. And so if you do that and you revenue share in accordance with Title IX, you really haven't stopped the criticism of these two sports are not getting their fair share and the antitrust issue. So when we talk about needing federal legislation, those two, it's like two locomotives and they're pulling in the opposite direction. And I've not heard a plan that satisfies both of those. And so when you look at what Governor Baker did, I think he threw a plan into the sphere of consciousness for people to discuss, knowing that it would create a lot of discussion, some for, some against, some confused. But I think he wanted to get a discussion point out there that shows what we could do. His plan is Title IX compliant. But would require some antitrust protection. But I do think it's fair that we should be challenged to provide more benefits to student athletes, and I'm supportive of that. I just don't have a great answer for how you do that with all the regulations that exist today.
Great, Harry. Two first-year basketball coaches right now, one obviously with an interim tag, the other without. Can you just kind of compare and contrast how different the evaluation process is, and particularly on the men's side, without really having the full complement of a roster for probably the first 20 plus games?
I think that both have done a good job, presented two totally different situations, both challenging in their own way. I mean, you look at Coach Kellogg, he come into a program that he was the third head coach in 3 years. And his predecessor left after 1 year. That left those student athletes pretty emotionally raw. I was with them when they found that news out. Well, they found out on social media, but within a few hours of them finding out, and had some candid conversations, and there was a lot of emotions in that room. And so, he really had to come in and build trust and build equity. Had to bring in a lot of players, trying to get them on the same page. So then and I think he's done a really good job of that. Coach Eilert, not totally different, but different. Our staff will tell you this. I always knew that the challenge was great. And I told Coach Eilert that. I think I told him one of our last meetings, I said, I almost feel guilty considering putting you in this position because I know how hard it's going to be. You've got a lot of new players, student athletes coming in. You had some guys who had been here and were probably hoping to play. Just no matter if there was not a coaching change, no matter who was coaching them, it was going to be a big coaching job when you take that many new people, a lot of them that are in their last year of eligibility. They're coming here trying to have a good career, most of them wanting to go pro or having aspirations to go pro. They don't know each other. They haven't played together, and you're trying to get those guys to be a team, right? And so just that would have been a monumental job. Then you take the coaching change, the transfer portal opening, some more roster fluctuations, not being able to get waivers for a couple of the kids, injuries. There was one that Coach Eilert moved on from. And so you just take all of that, and it's certainly been challenging. But I go back to, you can't just judge because of all those things. It's why when people push me wanting a number for football before the season, it's why I don't give a number, because there's just too many things that go into all of that.
So maybe the recent round of conference realignment is stopped for the short period, but history tells us there'll be another one in 5, 7, 10 years.
You couldn't let me rest for Christmas, Greg?
No, can't. So, obviously Washington State, Oregon State have been crushed. How confident are you that West Virginia isn't in the future in that predicament? They've had a spot at the table to this point, but is that going to continue?
I'm confident in where our positioning is. In a lot of ways, we're the gateway to the Northeast. I've said this before, we may only have a little less than 2 million people, but we are West Virginia's Dallas Cowboys. And so of those 1.8 million people, 1.6 million are following every possession. And so when you look at the valuations and you look at the viewership, and they're just in the last few days released the viewership numbers for all the Power 5 teams, we're always right there in the mix. We're not in the top 10, but we're in the top half in terms of the valuations and what we draw from a viewership standpoint. And I think because of our population, it not being great, it shows the power and the reach of our brand, right? And we can get into the Pittsburgh market. We can get into D.C. and Baltimore. We have a broad reach. And so for all of those reasons, I'm just very confident in our positioning from a conference perspective. The other thing I would say is this program and this university mean too much to the state and the people here. I've learned that the people here just won't let it not get what it needs to get. And so people are like, well, are you worried about Charlie Baker's proposal? And it would probably cost us an additional $8 to $10 million. No, because we're going to figure it out. One way or another, we are going to figure out how to compete at the highest of levels and how to provide whatever is allowed per NCAA rules that will allow this program to compete. I'm not going to let us not do that. I understand the pressure and the responsibility that comes with this position, but also West Virginians aren't going to allow that to happen. our leadership at the board level, our leadership at the state level, our leadership here at the institutional level. Like, it's just not going to happen. Whatever the highest level of college athletics is, we will be a participant and we'll be competitive.
Ren, I think you went on the radio a couple weeks ago and basically crushed any doubts about Neil's job. Just how do you view the football program as it is right now versus, when you started this time last year?
Yeah, so I was coming in last year getting a lot of questions about football, and I always try to. You guys have seen me enough. I'm always going to be calm and exude confidence, but that's hard when you're getting questions about something and you don't know. You weren't here. You're trying to answer questions, but I have spent a lot of time around the program. With meeting individually with all the coaches and most of the staff. I know most of the student athletes. I've been to a ton of practices, been in the locker room for pregame, halftime, postgame, so I have a great feel for the program. As an athletic director, when you visit with a lot of recruits and their parents, and I always say, above all else, when I look at a parent and tell them I would want my child to play in this program for this coach, you want to really mean it, right? And I can look at student athletes in our football program and say that and really mean it. There's so many things that are done right inside the program. And so I'm very proud about that. We got grades a day or two ago, and football was right at a 3-point for the entire team. That's extraordinarily rare to have a football team that's at a 3-point. And so a lot of great things that are happening. But again, as I said earlier, the general public's going to judge you by the tip of that iceberg, which is that scoreboard, those 12 Saturdays. And I get that, and Coach Brown gets that. We all understand that. And so it was rewarding to see them. You all will find with me, I'm pretty honest and transparent with what I say. And so when I came in here back in August, I said, I'm going to be surprised if they don't prove a lot of prognosticators wrong, because there's a great culture. They're for each other. There's a camaraderie. I mean, I think that's pretty close to a quote. And to see that play out is really positive, and I'm really proud of the team and excited about the future. I thought yesterday was a great day with the additions that they brought in. Think we're doing a better job in retention and recruitment and evaluation of prospects that are out there. Certainly, the growth of Country Roads Trust is a big benefit to that. To see their growth they've doubled their membership in just a couple of months here. That's incredible. So all of that plays together, but I'm excited about where the team is. Think they did a really good job, and excited about the future.
Speaking about Trust, are you excited about the mayonnaise?
Not at all excited about mayonnaise bath. And I'm not like Coach Brown. So Coach Brown hates mayonnaise, right? Like he really hates mayonnaise. My food like that is pickles. I hate, like, if this was a pickle juice challenge, there's no way I would be like headed to some country without extradition right now. But to be honest, so when they were first doing their drive, there was a few people that were tweeting me and stuff wanting to know what it would take for me to take a mayonnaise bath. So I literally threw a number out there I didn't think they could get to, if you want me to tell you the truth. I didn't think that we would get to 1,500. But we did, and so we'll pay that bet up. We got to figure out when and where. But I do think it's exciting. I just probably underestimated how much West Virginians love their Mountaineers, and how many West Virginians like to see fat, balding guys covered in mayonnaise. So.
Ron, speaking of NIL, I mean, there's a lot of talk that the way it's set up now is not right with the trust and with the schools. Not, kind of affects the recruiting and leaves a lot of room for misrepresentations, I would say. How do you stand on that? And are you guys? Would it hurt you to have to pick up the expense of that by yourself?
Yeah. So I don't have a crystal ball, but my guess will be that eventually the role that collectives play will probably go to institutions. I'm not necessarily super against that, but I'm against it a little bit because we have a really good relationship. So with Country Roads Trust, we have one collective. They're well supported from certainly Mr. Kendrick and Oliver Luck, but also some other supporters. And so they have a full-time staff. They do a really good job. By and large, their contracts are solid. I think they do what they say they're going to do. We're not directly involved in that. They're committed to compliance. Oliver certainly knows NCAA rules as good as anybody. And so that relationship is working great. And I have not seen any cannibalization of our annual giving. Now, we start to try to do a big capital project that could be a little different. There may be some people who have picked up in supporting NIL efforts that wouldn't be able to support capital, but it really hasn't hurt our annual MAC contributions that people give. If we brought it in-house, I think there definitely would be some cannibalization, because if people know it's us, they're going to want the benefits that they know we can provide: the parking, the premium seating, the pecking order in terms of who gets bowl tickets and NCAA tournament tickets and all that stuff. And so I do think there would be some cannibalization that would occur if that happens. So right now, I really like the way our relationship works, but it doesn't work that I would put the way that it functions. We're probably performing in the top 3 or 4% in the country in terms of just, the way that you would want it to function and the way that it's actually functioning. And so I understand that there's a lot of chaos out there with other institutions. And so I won't be surprised if at some point it's not allowed to come in-house. And we have a white paper of what we would do if tomorrow the NCAA waved a wand and said, hey, these are coming in-house. But I do like the setup that we currently have.
There is a saturation point for the people, though. I mean, they're being asked for St. Jude and the Wounded Warriors and this, that, the other thing, plus the fact of NIL contributions, MAC contributions, paying things up for the license fee for seats and things like that. I mean, there does come a time when they say, hey, I got to pay my kids.
Yeah, as somebody who has a salary that's published publicly, thanks to you guys, I get hit up a lot for all of those charities. I'm with you. The way that I have tried to communicate so far is, I might have even used this with you all before, but I know I did as we spoke to caravans and stuff. You go to church every week and you have your tithes and offerings, and then a lot of times they'll send a plate a second round on Mission Sunday or whatever for another round. And so that's the way I've tried to position this. I mean, I've been really clear about where our budget ranks in the Big 12 and our need to grow that if we want to remain competitive. And so, we really can't afford to have that cannibalization, but NIL opportunities are very important as well. And so, so far, West Virginians have rose to the occasion, thankfully. So.
Okay, well, I'll take these questions in order how they come in. Greg Hunter?
So, Wren, the Big 12 obviously underwent some change this year, even more next year. A couple outgoing, a bunch more coming in. Your thoughts of now that things you got a good picture of it, and then the scheduling matrix that's come out, you satisfied with that? Because there is some increased travel there that maybe you were hoping to avoid.
Yeah, so I preferred more regionalized scheduling than what we ended up with. There is, if you were to analyze all 4 years, there is some a hybrid regionalized approach. But what happened was you had some of the new schools coming in who greatly desired that over a 4-year period everybody played everybody. That wasn't as important to me. I would rather ensure that over a 4-year period we played Cincinnati every year. And so, as I alluded to, probably even in statements back in August, I had a desired outcome, but I alluded to, what's good for the outliers is tougher for the people who are geographically center. And so it requires everybody to give a little bit. And so what we ended up was with a hybrid approach where there's a regional component, and by and large, those regional people you're gonna play more often than the others. And so for us, there was only one of the 4 years in football, for instance, that we had to make 2 trips out to the West. We're fortunate in that year there happens to be 2 byes. And so we're having conversations about making sure we split those 2 trips up enough, one, that where they're not close to each other, but 2, that the bye is next to at least one of them, right? And so, if I had my druthers, especially take football aside in those other sports, and I mean, Provo, Salt Lake City, that's a beautiful part of the country. If you've never been one, we go out there and play, you're going to love it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I would not send teams out there, especially in Olympic sports. There were others, and let's use BYU for example. So they're the only Mormon-affiliated school in the country. They want a presence nationwide. They want to recruit nationwide. So they probably have a desire to get in this part of the country as much as possible because that's really important to the mission of their institution. So when you're in a room with colleagues, everybody puts their desires on the table, and you try to find something that works. Nobody gets it's like a house deal. A good house deal, neither side feels like they won, right? Everybody had to give on a little bit, and so that's probably where we ended up. So overall, I think it'll be a good thing. If it was just me in a vacuum, I would have probably went a little more regional on it. But I also understand why we ended up where we did.
Going back to the trust, are you able to see or share how Country Roads Trust compares to other collegiate trusts, and not only membership-wise, but just off of revenue they're bringing in and distributing with student athletes?
I don't get to see their financials. I don't get to negotiate deals. I know enough just watching from afar that it's growing rapidly, and I'm very pleased about that. I don't know. I suspect it's competitive. But I couldn't. I couldn't probably gather. There's not disclosure, so nobody really knows what anybody's doing. What I want to make sure of is that I'm doing whatever I can to help them grow, but I've never really asked for a balance sheet or finances, and part of that is from a compliance standpoint, that degree of separation is protecting all of us.
You spoke about regionalized scheduling. Any further discussions, talks with Pitt about in either major sports extensions? Yeah.
You get to the academic year and everybody is so busy and distracted, and this has been a time of unrest from conference standpoints. The ACC has had a lot going on. They expanded. So I fully expect we're going to extend that. Honestly, every time I see Heather at a whether it's a convention or a meeting or a game or whatever, we're both like, hey, we need to get together and extend those deals. So the spirit is there. You've heard, I think, all the coaches say they want to extend it. We just have to find a little time to actually sit down and hammer out the details of that. So there hasn't been any movement contractually in getting that done, but I have every reason to believe it will get done.
Last 2, Mike Gonzalez.
Going, just kind of picking up a little bit on, you said revenue streams and the seating could be good for increasing revenue. Just kind of to off of that, where else could you raise prices, for example, rather than building? Where would you not want to raise prices for revenue? And then you make money to spend money, right? Where would you like to maybe spend more money because your budget, like you said, has to grow?
So I think the more premium experiences that we can create those are where we can squeeze more money, whether that's suites or club seats, or even like the 2 clubs at the Coliseum. I mean, Club 35 drove revenue for us last year, and the Clark Family Mountaineer Club is certainly driving revenue for us. And it's driving revenue in MAC donations required to get in there and participate. It's driving revenue in sales in there in game day. We're already getting a lot of interest in people renting that venue to do different things, so it's going to drive revenue from that perspective. And then Fred and his family gave us a substantial donation to name that club, which was revenue. In terms of expenses, that's a pretty broad question, but it's an interesting one, right? Like, because you can't afford to not put forth a football and men's basketball product that's competitive. But let's take just to pull a number out of a hat, $50,000 in a lot of our sports would make a world of difference in their abilities to function and compete. Whereas you drop $50,000 in football's budget, and they probably wouldn't even notice it if you didn't tell them. And so, like, you know, I do think as part of our strategic vision planning, we got to spend a lot of time talking about that, Mike. I'm not dodging that question today, but it really is like, hey, we have some sports that I think we could be nationally competitive for not a lot more money investment. We also know that we have to compete because of the revenue that drives the whole department comes from football and basketball. How do we mesh all that together? But I am confident that we can do that. And what gives me confidence is you're seeing us compete in women's basketball. You're seeing women's soccer has been very competitive. See what happened with men's soccer. And so we just have to make sure that we maintain momentum there, that we're presenting what it takes to maintain momentum to our donors, and they can support it as well.
Right, so then more fair then, your 2 money makers then, are there top of the mind things like coaching salaries, travel luxuries, anything like that you think could be improved for spending on those 2 programs?
In those 2, I think our assistance pool overall, like, so the number of positions, we're very competitive, but the overall budget for those is something we really got to spend some time looking at. And that's probably something Coach Brown and I will spend some time discussing. And as we go into next year with men's basketball, no matter, you know, what we do from a leadership perspective, you know, our head coach pay, certainly in men's basketball has been very competitive, and it's fairly competitive in football, but we probably have to look at just that assistance pool and that allocation in those 2 sports, because that number has changed rapidly even in the last few years.
I think our final question goes to Cody.
Yeah, Wren. I don't think we've had a chance to talk to you since it happened, and I didn't want to forget it. Coach, what was the process, Coach Mazey announcing his retirement and then getting Coach Sabins as the coach in waiting?
Yeah, so generally, I'm not a huge fan of coach in waiting. And so probably in a 24-hour period, that's as much as I've ever given on a position that I felt strongly about in my entire career. Because the day before, even though I have a very high opinion of Coach Sabins, and he would have been a strong candidate for our job, like, I just fundamentally, there's just part of me, I've just seen too many of those not go very well. And so I'm just not a huge fan. But in that particular case, Coach Mazey and Coach Sabins have such a great relationship, and they both came to the table with a spirit to make it work. I mean, and everybody was given a little bit. I was given up on just wanting to always. I'm feeling like every time we should do a full search, and the best candidate should be hired then. Without saying too much, because it's not mine to share, but Coach Sabins had a Power 5 job offer on the table. It was his, and Coach Mazey maybe would have went a little bit longer in a different time and place, but in his mind, Coach Sabins was always going to be the successor, and so really it was 3 three guys sitting down talking about what's the best for the program. And I think where we ended up is what's best for the program. I give a lot of appreciation and thanks to both of those coaches who really came to the table giving up something that might have been best for them personally to do what was best for our student athletes and what was best to sustain the success of the program. And so I'm at peace and very comfortable with where it ended, although of all the things that we've dealt with, that was probably the day I was the most testy because it was just on the heels of a lot of drama, right? And I was thinking we were smooth sailing, we win a baseball championship, like let's just solidify leadership here with what we have. And so it's probably the only day that I was demonstrably agitated in my time here because I try to always be like cool under pressure. But it ended where where I think it should have, and that's a credit to those two. I've got so much respect for both Coach Mazey and Coach Sabins, and I think the future is really bright for that program. And after the first of the year, we'll have an announcement about an enhancement to the facility out there that I think is going to help continue that momentum. So now Mike's trying to wrap us again. It's what he always does. But if there's any others, I will answer if you guys have anything that you didn't get in. So with that,
Would you like a closing statement for what you'd like the fans and media to know? I'll stay out of it.
did you guys, you probably don't watch all of our videos. Did y'all see the video I did with Tony a couple days ago? So I'm talking with Caridi. He doesn't like to ever be in the forefront or limelight, but he's behind us, him and Sean, and they're giving us 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Well, Tony is not one that's known for brevity, and neither am I. So conciseness is not a strength, and so it's very intimidating. You're getting these answers, and you got somebody counting you down. And so we get to the end, and Michael is wrapping us. And so Tony just ends the interview and doesn't give me a chance to wish everybody happy holidays. And so I stop it and say, no, we're not going to wrap. I've got some things I'm not done saying. So then he wants Sean to edit it out, and I refused. I don't often play the boss card, but I refused. And so you guys need to go watch that video, but he was not happy. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So I'll just end by saying thanks for all you do to cover our teams. I know you work extremely hard. We may not always agree on everything, and there's times that you guys write something and I tell Michael I don't think that was the right approach to this. But by and large, I think you're very fair to our student athletes, our coaches. You've been very good to me. Hope you all have very happy holidays. I'll remove any suspense and drama, Mr. Herzl. I think you'll be lump of coal again. So, that way you don't have to wonder. But in West Virginia, I think a lump of coal has a different connotation maybe than the rest of the world. Maybe that's, the good boys and girls actually get coal. Yeah. So thank you guys. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in Charlotte.